meeting for 5th of May 2022. I was asked if you could all be standing for a karakia, please. Tuta. Just a reminder that this meeting will be recorded and live streamed on the Napier City Council Facebook page. So apologies I have is Brosnan and Councillor Taylor for being late. So do I have a mover for that, please? Right. Moved by Councillor Tapani, seconded by Councillor Bogle. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Does anyone have any conflicts of interest? Is there any public forum? Yes, there is. So the first one I have is Darren Mason and John McGifford from Central Football. If you'd like to... Welcome.
Thank you.
You're aware you have, you can speak for 10 minutes, and at 9 minutes you'll get one ding on the bell.
Yep.
Hopefully you don't hear the two dings. Thank you.
Cut it out.
Okay.
Okay, so do I need to speak into that? Can everyone hear me, I hope? I'm Darren Mason, CEO of Central Football. With me is John McGifford, who is our projects manager and former CEO of Central Football. So just want to give you a quick recap of where we've got to this point with the Park Island Master Plan. So that was adopted firstly in 2013 and then reviewed in 2017. As part of that, there was deemed to be a need for an artificial football turf, along with floodlighting and other infrastructure, changing rooms, etc. At Park Island, and that was to be homed on Bond Field, but sort of on the back of Bluewater Stadium. Over the last few years, we have been proactive with engaging with council staff around the timing and the costs of that turf, and that's resulted in last year, through the LTP deliberations, of $500,000 being awarded towards the project. Whilst we're grateful for that contribution, at the same time, that has also caused some issues on the current site. So where it's currently located on Bond Field, there are some power lines that go through that proposed site. That, conservatively, according to Unison, is going to cost about $1.5 million to move. There's also no car parking or changing facilities on that site at the moment either. So we're conservatively looking at about a $4.5 million project there, as opposed to what we initially thought would be about a $2.2 million project. So that's led us to think that there must be a better location at Park Island for this artificial turf. So I'm just going to pass to John, who's just going to run through the map here that we've got. Just a very presentation, because obviously it's sometimes easy to understand what we're proposing when you visualise it.
Sorry, John, we'll need you to use the mic if that's right.
Well, there's a freestanding mic,
Okay.
Unless
a
it's got a...
handheld mic.
Here we go. Thank you.
All right.
Too kind.
There is a system.
Is that okay? Can people hear me now?
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah. So that's Park Island Master Plan as it currently is, the map from it. Just to get the lay of the land here. This is Westminster Avenue coming along here, Clydesdale Drive down here. Northern Sports Hub is where Hawke's Bay Rugby currently are. Darren will refer in his address around the Bond Field and the Shrimpton Field, which the Southern Sports Hub is where the Bond Field is. Central Sports Hub is where the Shrimpton Field is. Just a quick bit of background. This is where the artificial currently is planned for, which is in behind the Napier City Rovers Bluewater Stadium. You'll notice there's these little pink dots here, which I'll make a little bit clearer. This is where the power lines currently run through, where the site where the turf is proposed to go. get rid of those. This bit here is where the changing rooms were meant to be, which now are not part of the plan, unfortunately, were meant to go, and clearly there was some more parking going to be made available as well too. But we'll get rid of both of those, because our suggestion to council, our request to council, is to look at a change of plan to allow the field to come in here on the Shrimpton field. Now, this isn't to scale at all, and certainly where we've got it positioned is not saying that's where it needs to be positioned. It is quite handy there because it's quite close to the existing changing facilities that are on Shrimpton, and clearly there is plenty of parking available around here. But certainly that's very much indicative. We've paced this out, and we know it can fit into Shrimpton. Where we've currently got it sort of currently it's sitting on a bit of the where the cricket boundaries are. But I'm only repeating myself when I say that it's not certain. It doesn't have to go there. There's plenty of room at Shrimpton where it can go, but preferably close to the changing rooms as possible. With that, I'll hand back to Darren.
Thanks, John. So just wanted to touch on a couple of the key points that we believe are additional to cost in terms of the reason why we want to move it to Shrimpton. So one, and John's alluded to it, around infrastructure. So the car parking and that little lane that goes between Bluewater Stadium and the hockey field at the moment is a bottleneck at the best of times. So that would obviously need to be some roading extensions put in place there or on the other side on Clyde Jeffrey Drive. Changing facilities, as we touched on, there isn't anything there. So without going to the cost of putting changing facilities in, we'd need to have people, walk from the Bond Field turf across the road to Shrimpton Field, which is probably a 300 metre walk. Particularly at night, that's not particularly ideal. So that infrastructure, optimum use. So our junior footballers are the ones that use Park Island a heck of a lot, and you will have all seen Saturday morning down there as it's heaving with people and kids and parents. Our ideal model for our junior program is that we have a rotation sort of set up where the kids do a skills-based program and then some games, but they sort of rotate around a fair bit of Shrimpton Field at the moment. If we have the turf on Bond Field, then we could potentially have kids moving from both Shrimpton and Bond in a morning, which again, with the traffic and the number of people down there, is far from ideal, having kids and parents walking across what is a busy road at that time of morning. So that's not ideal. And also perception. So it's a bit of an odd thing probably to look at, but in Palmerston North there is a council-funded turf at the CET Arena, and that is basically being used by Palmerston North Marist. They are perceived to be the owners of that turf in Palmerston North. Now, what we wouldn't want to have happen in Napier is that this turf, where it's based, be deemed to be Napier Rovers owned. That wouldn't be any fault of Napier Rovers, but that would be potentially seen by the football community as being a Napier Rovers owned turf, in our view. So, we want it to be a community-based turf. Residential impact as well. So, I guess on Shrimpton, the lighting at night in particular is going to be less impact on Oaklands and Westminster Ave people. And cost, as we've already alluded to, as a factor, no doubt. We don't believe we can fundraise 4.7 million, but we do believe that we can come up with a $2.2 million through fundraising, and obviously the council contribution that you've provided. So, yeah, that basically is us in summary. We're really committed to make this happen. We want to relieve you of your $500,000. So, yeah, open to any questions from council.
We have any questions, please? You're wise.
Thank you, through the chair. I note in the proposal you've given to us, you've received support by the other users of Shrimpton Field. And just wondering, in the discussions that you've had with them, because I note that this will be fenced, which could create some barriers. I just was wondering, to what degree was the discussions that you've had with the other clubs and organisations that use the field to satisfy yourselves that it's not going to impinge on their use of the park? Yeah.
So, yeah, they're very informal. I spoke to the football clubs, cricket, rugby within that all use that facility. The cricket is the one that's most likely to be impacted, and obviously with the map up here, it does look like it impinges a wee bit on the boundaries. So, excuse me, I had a conversation with Craig Finley. Obviously, they don't want to lose any cricket wickets or have to be impacted there at all. But as John alluded to, I don't think that will be an issue. I think we can make it work without that. To the point around the fencing, yes, it desperately does need to be fenced, just from a security point of view. We don't want to be putting something like that in, just like the hockey turfs, I guess, where potentially we get some, dare I say, idiots who decide that they want to ride bikes or cars or something over it. So, obviously we need to protect that as well. So, but the conversations were all very informal in the sense that this is what we're looking at doing, and they were all very supportive of the idea that it would be best placed over there.
Thank you.
Simpson.
Through you, Mr Chair, just obviously similar questions around loss of other sporting facilities. Looks like a couple of cricket wickets and a couple of football pitches. But my question mainly around the fencing. So you're now looking at putting up a fencing around a artificial turf. The fencing, the style of that fencing, will it have hoardings or will it be open and clear? Because obviously putting an obstacle like that in the way between the changing rooms and other playing fields creates a barrier, a visual barrier.
Yeah.
What's your intentions for the fencing?
Do you want to answer that one from
Certainly the intention is for it to be open fencing. There's a number of examples throughout the country where there are artificial turfs, and to the best of my knowledge, they're all open. So we'll still give a good exposure to the rest of Park Island, any other sports going on there.
Sorry, just to add to that too, you mentioned that the football fields itself being impacted, obviously that's something that we would control and be aware of. But we're sort of figuring that there is potential to give up some of the space that we currently use, because we would be constantly using that turf. So that would sort of enable some more space to be used for other codes.
Further question, sorry. Would your intentions long term be to put lighting around that turf?
Yeah, yes, definitely. So yeah, that's a key component of it as well, is to be floodlit.
Just to clarify a little bit, in the paper that is coming up later this morning, it's an investigation stage to move on, and that a report back to council with what they would like.
No, my questions have been answered, thank you.
No other questions? Well, thank you very much. Football, good to see another sport on the move, wanting to get things right, and a good presentation. And as you're probably aware, there's a paper coming up today on our committee meeting that it has some recommendations.
Thank you for your time.
Next public forum is Barbara Arnott and Bob Morrison, and
I just think these people are so important. Is that okay?
yep, good as well.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll need another chair.
Thank you. Is that on?
No.
Try singing into it first.
Oh, thank you. Before I introduce the members of the Trust, I just want to tell you how the Trust formed, because nearly 25 years ago I stood before Napier City Council and gave them a concept that pathways could circumnavigate Napier, circumnavigate Hastings, and join up and then sort of be like the spokes of the wheel, so that eventually every residence in Napier would be less than 2 kilometres away from a pathway. And the councillors laughed at me and said, "Don't be ridiculous, Barbara. No one's going to want to bike along a concrete strip along our coast." And they said no. That was a $900,000 project that went from Bayview to Watoto. And so the council having turned me down, I went to the different Rotary clubs, and the Rotary clubs were excited about it. And they said yes, but I didn't understand how Rotary clubs worked. And although they worked towards a theme, they had never ever joined together to do a project. And so I floundered around with the Rotary clubs, having gone to the Rotary clubs in Napier and the Rotary clubs in Hastings, and got them all excited, but did not know how that worked. And then I met the admirable Sue Page. So the members of the trust that started in 2002, and I'm standing here today, I should sit, I suppose, I'm sitting here today because we disestablished the trust on the 31st of March 2022, after 20 years. And so these people are original trustees: Judah Connor, Sue Page, Brian Marnie and Bob Morrison. And myself and Clive Squire were community members, and we had two other members one from Taradale, Alan Watton, and John Hennessy from Ahuriri, Napier. Brian's from Napier, Bob's from Green Meadows, Jude's from Ahuriri Sunrise, and Sue's from Ahuriri. And the geographical split was important because these people are community people, and the pathways are about the community. So for the next 20 years, we raised money and we built pathways. We did nothing else. That's all we did, in partnership with Napier City Council. And it worked like this. We raised the money, we walked the walks and had a look and saw where the pathways were needed, talked to the community. The council designed and built. After they designed and built, they gave us a bill or told us how much the tenders were, and we gave them a donation. And for 20 years, it worked like that fabulously. And we built probably more than 50 K of pathways, because we did almost circumnavigate. There's one tiny little bit that we haven't done, which is from Turanuri Drive to the bottom of Pariety Hill. And in March, we gave the last 600,000 that we had to the council to do the linkage from Dolbell Reserve to the PAR, so that people will be able to walk or bike. You won't bike on Otatra PAR because that's it's not a biking place, but you'll be able to walk and circumnavigate Napier on the pathways. And so for the first $1 million that we raised, we were Transit gave us $1 for every dollar. So for the first $1 million, we really raised $2 million. And there are some notable people, plus 70,000 people in Napier, who absolutely got onto this. As soon as we built Bayview to West Shore, everybody saw what we were talking about, and it became absolutely clear. And Hastings, who I had gone and talked to the 6 Rotary clubs in Hastings and invited them over, as soon as they saw it, it was obviously something that they worked out, yep, we can do this too. For the first 4 or 5 or even 6 years, it was even longer than that, we had some fabulous support. Bob Moray was one of them. He flew into town. He was a developer here, and told us that for every dollar we raised, he'd give us $1. Now, if you're going out to the community and asking for money, and you can say that your dollar that you give will raise $4, because if Bob gives us $2, Transit gave us another $2, then it works fantastically. Eventually, it became mainstream. A man called Graham Wall, who's a real estate agent in Auckland, doesn't get out of bed for less than $10 million, one of those ones, flew into Blackburn every Christmas for 3 Christmases, saw the pathways getting built, rang John Key, got a quarter of an hour appointment, rang me and said, how do you do this? And then went down and talked to John Key, and the Aotearoa Trail was started. So we were evangelistic, and Alan Watton and John Hennessy, who have both died, and we did joke in the early days that if you wanted to get off this trust, because it's not a talking trust, remember, it's a doing trust. If you wanted to get off this trust, you had to die. And sadly, those 2 people who were absolutely pivotal to the trust did die during that time. But we were evangelistic, and we went went all over New Zealand. People invited us to talk to other trusts and conferences and other councils to say how we were going to do it. Green Meadows itself gave $45,000 from their art exhibition, fantastic, and the Rotary clubs just kept fundraising, fundraising and fundraising, as well as building the shelters, the 5 shelters that you see on the pathways. We had fabulous support from everybody, but why did it work? Well, it worked because of the trust between the council and the trust. We raised the money, we trusted the council to do the paths that we said, we trusted them to design them for the people, and that's exactly what happened. And then, just as it became mainstream, and we were thinking, well, because the government are funding this, because local government and the regional council, and we had regional council advisors and Sports Hawke's Bay advisors on our trust, and anybody who would help us came and talked to us and helped us on the journey. But just when all this was getting to be really fantastic and they were building pathways in the rest of New Zealand, a wonderful man called Basil McLeod left us a legacy, a very incredibly generous legacy, and asked for nothing. He didn't want his name splashed over everything. He didn't want anything like that. He just wanted to give us this legacy that we used and grew for the pathways, and hence Maggie's Way. His wife was called Maggie, and hence Maggie's Way in Kent Terrace, and it will still be Maggie's Way as it goes down past Dolbell and up to Atatra Pa and joins up that sort of bit. So we've had wonderful support over 20 years, and I suppose when I ask the trust members what's the best thing that they think about about the trust and its work, it's really seeing people using the pathways and seeing the community being connected like that in a way that they never have before. So the well-being of the community, recreational, people on bikes that never been on bikes before, people on wheelchairs who know that they're going to have a smooth surface on the concrete pathways. It's been a blast, hasn't it? It's been absolutely fabulous. Every month for 10 years, we gave ourselves January off. We've met in your council, and you wouldn't have even known we were there. But we met and designed and worked with the council officers, and they have been nothing but superb. So we want to say thank you to the council, and we want to say thank you to Napier City. Our journey is over. We're hoping that the council, there is still more pathways to be built. We do still want that other bit. If there's anything left over from the 600,000, I know that Jason, the Admiral Jason, will do something about it. So thank you very much, Napier City Council. Thanks very much, Napier City. Oh yeah, and the money. Jason will talk to you about this. This is our money man. This is our secretary. We have people who, like, everybody does everything, but we never had a checkbook, ever. We took cash when we did the Gareth Morgan projects that we worked for him and got money from, and that Guardian Trust held all our money, which meant that which was fabulous because they then just put it straight into the council, and we probably raised something more than 2,200,000, and Brian's got the exact figures, but we think that, and the fact that most of that 2 million garnered another 2 million is pretty impressive. For it was mainly 7 people, wasn't it, sitting quietly doing things. So thank you very much. Thank you to the council, and thank you to the city. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Barbara, and it's certainly a great vision and a great result. Kirsten.
Thank you, through the chair. On behalf of council and our whole community, I just want to extend, a wholehearted thank you for everything you've achieved over the past 20 years. It's truly inspirational, Barbara, sitting here listening now to some of those details I knew, others I didn't. So to actually fully understand how this came about and the commitment and the partnerships along the way is just absolutely outstanding. So, we now have an incredibly valuable community community asset. Even myself, who, I'm a self-confessed anti-cyclist. It's very hard to get me on a bicycle, but I've invested in an e-bike and I'm out on those trails and pathways. So, and you see all sorts of people, all ages out there enjoying it. And not only our locals, but, visitors to the region, the pathways have enabled us to host incredible events like the Air New Zealand Marathon and Iron Māori. So it's something that will be here for generations to be enjoyed by all. And we can't say thank you enough for all that you've done. So just know that everybody is incredibly appreciative and all your hard work will be recognised for many, many years to come. So thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? The Bogue.
Hi, not a question. I'd just like to add to what the Mayor's already said. Thank you very much. I'm a very enthusiastic cyclist and I've traversed many but not all of the paths that have been put up around Hawke's Bay. And I just wanted to say, as a cyclist, that our paths are as good as any of the best in the rest of the country, because many of those other paths I have travelled, but I'm so proud it has opened up our region in a way that you'd never ever believe was possible. So as a cyclist, thank you very much.
Thank you. I actually pulled them off the bell. So Barbara will know.
The whole trust.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So any announcements by the Mayor?
Thank you, through the Chair. Just wanting to make a bit of announcements about something that happened earlier this week on Monday that was pretty special here in Ahuriri. So we were the first place in the country to have the 30 kilometre per hour variable school signs, and alongside that the bilingual Kura school signs actually put up outside St Patrick's School on Riverbend Road. So a pretty momentous occasion to be the first in the country, and we had quite a number of people here to celebrate that event. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and let our community know that we're leading the way in terms of that signage. And secondly, just a little bit of a call to action for our community. We are currently consulting on our 22-23 annual plan. So if you haven't had an opportunity yet to jump online to say at napier.nz where you can make an online submission, you can do that up until the end of next week, the 13th of May. So we'd love to hear from you if you'd like to pop online or pick a hard copy up from one of the libraries or the customer services office. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't have any announcements other than saying at 7:30 tonight the Hawks are playing the Airs, and I apologise for Sunday. I always told the coach I shoot straight. Do we have any notifications of minor matters?
Oh, thank you, Mr Chair. I did have a minor matter to raise today, looking for an update on progress at the splash pad in Maraenui, but I understand that our Director of Infrastructure will be providing that in agenda item 7 today, so thank you.
That's correct. Announcements by management.
Thank you, Mr Chair. A couple of things from me. Just on behalf of the staff, I'd like to thank the Rotary Pathways Trust. They have been a great bunch of folk for us to work with over an extended period of time. So really nice to see you all here this morning, and thanks for your great work. And I just want to update you on the top 5 water projects, which I'm sure you're all looking forward to. A couple of things from me. Pandora Pipeline, a couple of bits going on there. We've issued a contract to Davies Waste for the cleaning of that pipeline, so that'll be underway shortly. Alongside that, we're doing some flow meter installation so we can improve our monitoring of what's going on. Preventative maintenance, and I will circulate these notes, so I'll keep it brief. Carrying on with the preventative maintenance, doing CCTV work, seeing what's going on in the pipes, doing some clearing and bits and pieces depending on what we find. And they're also doing some leak detection work. The bores are going really well, so that's A3 and T8. So the containerised treatment plant will be coming into A3 shortly, and T8 has got to 80 metres. And I'm always nervous to say this, touch wood without a hitch. So we're looking forward to the next stage of that one. The wastewater, obviously, we're running the consultation on the trade waste stormwater integrated bylaw. So, and I think there's been really good engagement in terms of that. Airport pump station is going really, really well, and we're still expecting to complete that by the end of July. So some great work going on in the water team, but we will circulate these notes for your reference. That's all from me.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Very good. Can I have confirmation of minutes for the extraordinary Sustainable Napier meeting held on 24th March 2022? Councillor Simpson, seconded by Councillor Bogue. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Right, agenda items. Item 1, dissolution of Napier City, Napier Rotary Pathway Trust. Jason, are you...
Kia ora, Mayor Wise, kia ora Chair, kia ora councillors, members of the public watching and council officers. My paper's just a brief paper to say thank you primarily to the Trust for all the hard work. I think we've heard today from our Mayor and the other councillors how much we do appreciate the work. The work that has been done will leave an enduring contribution to our city, and we are truly thankful for that. Since we're on this report, I'll take it as read. Most of the things have already been said, but there has been some numbers that I've had clarified since writing this report. The Trust did donate over $2.15 million to the city, and as Barbara mentioned to earlier, for every dollar we did get more value than a dollar. Got up to 2 or 3 times for the city's growth of the pathway network. One more clarification that I'd just like to make in my report, a correction was around, I had a rough estimate of around 30 kilometres of pathway, but after talking to the Trust following putting this report forward, that is well in excess of 30 k's, somewhere above 50 kilometres, plus all the other contributions have made to the city. So just want to make it clear that there was a lot more pathway than I've currently reported in my report that was provided to for the city, and we're internally thankful for that. I'd like to make a special mention to those past members of the Trust. Some of them I've worked with, John, for example. It's really important to realise the contribution they made to the city, and in their passing, what they've left behind is their legacy. So our hearts and thoughts with them for the contribution they've made. And on a personal note, I've really enjoyed working with the Trust. It's been a really enjoyable part of my job, and I've loved catching up with you every month, and we do thank you, and the city thanks you for all the hard work and time, effort and funding you've provided us. So thank you. Any questions?
Any questions? Councillor Bogue.
Thank you, Jason. Have we got any plans for any more off-cycle trails within Napier over the next foreseeable future?
There is, through the district plan review, there's actually a new chapter proposed in there with a identification of a trail network through there. That is one mechanism. There is other trails that I believe have been working with the regional council, as well as a large trail that has been proposed through the Mission Estate development, linking up those western hills of Taradale. So there's a lot of work being done by different sections of council, including the transportation team. I'll be happy to discuss that further outside of this forum.
Councillor Crown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering, given the discrepancies and, just getting the numbers correct, etc., whether we might consider an action out of this to actually record sort of the history and the length of path and the right number of the money raised, etc., from an archival perspective, so that we have that information available for our community ongoing.
Through you, Mr Chair, that's a very, very good point, Councillor Crown. There is some work being done by the Trust at the moment, I believe, to actually formalise a bit of a short history of the Trust, and that will pull together all that information, and that will be, I believe, provided to Council for a future record and archiving, and we will be providing input into that as much as possible to make sure it's as accurate as possible, and yeah, the legacy is left in writing for the city.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Sorry, Councillor Tupney.
Thank you, through you, Mr Chair. Just acknowledging our speakers and the Trust in your 20-year service to the city, and their indicators during their presentation in the public speaking forum around 2 more portions of the pathway which are yet to be completed. Could you give us an outline of what are the intentions around those spaces as far as our involvement is concerned?
Through you, Mr Chair, thank you for that question. Yes, one of the principal links through connecting the circumnavigating of the city is through the Western Hills of Taradale. Some of those links are through, like I alluded to earlier, the mission plan change area. That's been written into our district plan, structure plan for that area, that linkages. So through the RMA process, we should be inheriting that part of the network. There's also some other links through, as I reported on earlier around the Dolbell link, there was more desirable routes through private property that we couldn't get across the line. There's still some opportunities through longer strategic planning to get those. So those 2 would be, I'm assuming, are the 2 links that are being referred to. The stuff, a private route through to Otachapa and a route through the pending mission plan change area. There's also some plans for building a pathway that's intended to link up to Whirinaki, but I'm unsure of where that's sitting at this current stage.
Thank you, Mr Chair.
I guess further to that, even though they're dissolved, I would imagine they'll be keeping a close eye on what you do. That's right. Thank you. No other questions? Do I have a mover, please, for Councillor Bogue, a seconder? Councillor Crystal, do you wish to speak?
I think it's all been said, but I think our city will be forever grateful to the Rotary Pathway Trust for making these paths available and making the city that much more accessible for older people and younger people on bikes, and for this whole effort of bringing together the different Rotary clubs. So it's a wonderful model that I hope other areas may emulate, but we're very grateful for the work that's being done, and it's a reminder of what can be done by a community that's determined to make a contribution to the well-being of their fellow community members. So thank you.
Councillor Crystal.
Just to follow on, this is an amazing asset for our city in the future. My children have grown up riding and walking these paths, and now it's just me and my dog Maggie. So we could have a fun time down Maggie's Way, and it's so walking, cycling and dog walking is a very important part along those pathways, and it's just amazing for the next generations to have this asset. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'll put the motion as the officer's recommendation. All of those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, second item, Central Football relocation proposal for the artificial turf. Jason.
Thank you very much, Chair. Kia ora again. As you've already heard from Central Football, they've approached our council with a proposal to look at the possible relocation from what was outlined in the structure plan or master plan for Park Island to relocate the artificial turf, which council have agreed, subject to conditions, to partially grant, a $500,000 grant in the year 23-24. My paper that I'm presenting and seeking a recommendation is for approval for Central Football Incorporated and Napier City Council to advance those investigations and consultation regarding the possible relocation of the proposed artificial soccer turf, contrary to what was identified in the Park Island Master Plan and Plan Change 11, and for me to, following, if that is approved by this council, it will be followed by a report back with the outcomes and recommendations from this officer or other officers around that investigation prior to us proceeding with any Resource Management Act or Reserves Act processes to formalise whatever the recommendation is. Brief background, I'll take the report as read again, but brief background is we do have a grant sitting in our long-term plan of $500,000 to assist Central Football in building this facility. And as you have been made aware, the Central Football have found some complications with primarily financial around building the proposed facility as it was located in the master plan. Their proposed location does potentially better utilise existing facilities and assets, which we currently do not have any current funding proposed to build. But this paper will be looking at, if approved, me going through with our officers and Central Football to assess all options around the park, not only this option, and try to find out the best opportunity, I suppose, for the Central Football to build this facility, as well as not compromising the other users of the park. As you're aware, the Central Football have had some initial consultation with a number of the park users and associations. We'll be looking to elaborate that much further and iron out some of those concerns as part of that investigation. And from there, report back to the council on what we believe alongside Central Football is the best option around future use. There are some alternative options, basically that this council disagrees and would like them to proceed in the current location. But this officer's recommendation would be to approve those further investigations and reporting back to council to look at alternative locations within the master plan. Thank you, and I'm welcome to take any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Brown.
Kia ora, through you, Mr Chair. I just want to check my understanding. It seems to me that issues of people crossing the road from both sides, the traffic, the light pollution and the others raised this morning in public forum aren't actually going to be solved by moving this. They're more being delayed until we develop that area of the park. Is that right?
Thank you. Through you, Mr Chair. Thank you for the question, Councillor Brown. Yes, fundamentally, the facility, if agreed to be built, we still will have those impacts of the increased use, the lighting. Eventually, if we provide additional parking on the bond side and this facility is on the opposite side, we will still have those impacts. The resource consent process should iron out any of those issues. We have undertaken substantial works around pedestrian safety along Clyde Jeffrey Drive with some raised crossings, which I believe would mitigate some of those concerns. But I think fundamentally this paper is about giving officers the opportunity to go and dig deeper and find out what the real issues are and what the real solutions are, and possibly coming to a middle ground of where the most ideal situation is for the users, for the city and for Central Football.
Any other questions? Councillor Tapani.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Chair. A couple of questions, please. Jason, good morning. The first one is one of clarity. Near the close of your statement, you referred to council's preference as the current location or current position. So when you say, could you clarify what is current position? And as you, because there are two locations on the map and I don't know which one in your definition is current.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Chair. Sorry, that my reference to around the preference for the current facility was that was an alternative option to what I'm recommending. If council as a whole would like to consider other options, there is the option of me as an officer not proceeding with this report and us recommending that the facility goes in the original location.
Okay.
In regards to the original location, if you refer to page 6, there is a plan on there which highlights Clyde Jeffrey Drive through the middle. There is the current location of the proposed facility is at the back end of that arrow, which is behind the Blue Water Stadium fundamentally, backing onto Bondfield. And the proposal that we have been put forth in the business case from Central Football is to locate that on Shrimpton Field on the northern side of Clyde Jeffrey Drive, closer to the Shrimpton changing rooms. So my recommendation is that we do proceed with the investigation report in consultation with the other users to look at a more suitable location. But that was just another option that I was putting forth to council if they were not of agreement that they could say no.
Cool bananas, thank you. And my next two questions are around the changing facility. So I realise we're going into feasibility, so I'm just sending out a signal. I noticed that the footprint of the proposed changing facility is 4 times the size of the current facility, and we'll be interested to see whether or not there'll be a change to the existing facility, changing facility in the middle of the car park next to the Shrimpton Field, and by extension, whose obligation it is to care and provide for the current facility in that car park. Is it a council responsibility? And if that footprint is likely to change, when might we know, or when might we see those indicators?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. No, that's a valid question. We are, through this investigation, if approved, we'll be looking at what increased demand it's going to put on that changing room area, and then look at options around how we would fund or facilitate that. And that can be reported back to this council forum. Remembering we are at the early stages of this investigation. We do understand that there will possibly be need for an increase in the level of service as part of this facility, but we just need to do those investigations, and that's what we're seeking a decision on today.
Thank you, Jason. No more questions.
So the CEO might be able to clarify a little bit there, please.
Thank you, through the chair. Tēnā koutou katoa councillors. I suppose for clarity, because the Park Island Master Plan was a decision of council, what we're asking you here today is to investigate something outside of that plan. So a lot of the questions have been really helpful for the things that we need to include in that feasibility study. But this is a question of process and whether or not you are agreeable to us investigating something different to what we have in the master plan. So I hope that clarifies this stage for you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor McGrath.
I'll hold off my question.
You good? Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, CEO, for that clarification. I certainly like it when we look at different options, because sometimes we should not be stuck in a particular pathway. But my question does relate back to the master plan, and I do apologise. I had an allocated time yesterday to look at the master plan and was otherwise occupied. Did the master plan pick up the fact that those KVA, that 33 KVA power line was there and its cause and consequence? Did it actually make reference to it and any options for mitigation?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Yes, the master plan was very cognizant of those power lines, and I do believe through previous iterations of the long-term plan there was funding to underground it, because it was, I suppose, fundamental to the plan change, given that it runs straight through that field. Since that time, I believe there's been changes in priorities around allocation of funding, and this is possibly an opportunity to revisit that. But the plan change does give us flexibility as well. It was clear in the district plan that although it is there to guide development, it also has built-in flexibility. So this is where we've got the opportunity to reconsider this location. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. That saves me a bit of time.
Thank you, Councillor Crystal.
I had the same question.
You're sitting next to each other.
No.
Righto. Councillor Tapani.
Thank you, and through you, Mr Chair, just supplementary to Councillor Simpson's question. By extension then, because I remember that power line running through the master plan, are there any indicators or anything that council should be aware of as a result of those lines remaining where they were or where they are currently? Because the master plan talked about the potential for moving in order to facilitate a better use of the grounds. So if the cost is prohibitive, if we're now looking at other options, which like Councillor Simpson I welcome, what are the implications around leaving those lines in that space for the future of those reserves? Are we just kicking the can to touch here?
So I might save you from answering, or you quickly answer, but the idea of this paper is so we can investigate all those sort of things.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Yep.
Do you have anything to add to that?
Thank you, Mr Chair. Yes, I completely appreciate that there is a risk to council of us, if we don't consider that option of what the impacts are, if we don't relocate or bury those power lines. But in this case, we've passed on the responsibility of the build, I suppose, and the funding to Central Football, and this is the opportunity to investigate whether that is the best location given the substantial cost to underground those lines. So we will look at that in more detail as part of the investigation. Thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
I was just going to say, I'll move it if you stage.
Okay. Moved by Councillor McGrath, seconded by Councillor Mawson. Would you like to speak on that, please, Councillor?
Just through the chair, I've spent a lot of time down at Park Island in recent years with kids, but the thing for me is we're an event city, and you probably find if someone sat down and did some maths that our sporting events are huge, and it's probably COVID, and we bring kids, youth, adults to our city, all year round, and we need to stay ahead of the game. We got trapped a few years ago with a need for indoor courts. It turned into a velodrome, and we're only just completing it now. The Park Island Master Plan was released in 2013, and it was identified we would have a need in the future. Well, surely this is the future now, and we need to just get on and get stuff done. If we bring an event here and it's outdoors and it rains, it trashes the fields and probably doesn't lead to very good finals football, for example, here. If there's an artificial, they can get on with it, and there's no loss to the tournament. So I fully support getting on with it.
Councillor Mawson.
Yeah, I fully support as well. I'm looking forward to this report coming back because to me, I personally have been down there as well during a practice day, let alone game day. And the bottleneck on the other side by Bondfield is just horrendous. So I can see a lot more positives out of this. So I'm looking forward to the report coming back and checking that out. Thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Mr Chair. While I am in support of the motion, I just wonder whether the recommendation is actually too finite. It's talking about the relocation of the proposal. It doesn't actually talk about the feasibility of staying where it is with regards to the master plan. Whereas during our discussion, it was implied that it would be a more holistic approach around the feasibility.
You, Mr Chair, just for your consideration, that was discussed by officers, and we felt that we already have a decision of council for where it is. Probably just happy to seek any amended wording, but just wanted to provide my reassurances that that is part of the feasibility study. But because we have the decision for where it is now, we didn't include it in the resolutions. Apologies about that. Kia ora.
Yeah, and through you, Mr Chair, the recommendation is about the possible relocation, so there's no predetermined decisions made as part of my recommendation.
No, I think there's plenty of leeway there that we come up with the right answer for where this field goes. Any other comments? Okay, put the motion. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Jason again. Well, just to make sure we treat all sports fairly, we've got item 3, which is a proposed McRae Field toilet. So Jason, please.
Kia ora all once again. I'll try and keep this short because of how much there is on the agenda. I'll take the report as read, but fundamentally what I'm seeking a decision of council on is around a request for additional capital and operational funding for a public toilet facility at Park Island at the Northern Sports Hub next to the new field, formerly known as the McRae Field. My recommendation is the approval of council for the proposed installation of the new toilet block facility to facilitate the growth and development of Park Island, to approve an additional $83,640 of additional capital funding that will be coming from our financial contributions fund to deal with the growth of the park and the new public toilet facility, as well as approving ideally additional operational budget of shy of $5,000 for the increased level of service that we're providing to the community. Again, taking the report as read, fundamentally the issue is that we've built a new facility that is very popular and being used by the community, rugby community, at the McRae Field off Orutu Drive in Park Island. As part of that, we've attracted a lot of people using the facility without providing any toilet facilities. I think you can join the dots with the issue there. On page 31, there is a plan of the current field and the proposed toilet block that we are considering to install, as well as a picture of the proposed toilet block. We are repurposing a toilet block that was formerly on Marine Parade, so we currently hold that in stock, so no cost to council, and obviously some environmental improvements by reutilising that asset, I suppose. And we have had our wonderful team at the City Services do some costing of the install. That's come through just shy of 70,000. I've provided a contingency on there, which landed us at the $83,000 request. I've also discussed this with our financial team. It is a clear increase in level of service as part of growth of the city and sporting facilities, and the recommendation was it was to be funded through the financial contribution fund. The operational team as well at City Service also provided an estimate of cost to service this facility on an annual basis, which I've included at that $5,000 figure of operational budget. The benefits of this is obviously pretty clear. Providing a public toilet for the community in this location will not only benefit the users of the new sports field, but it will also benefit the wider Parklands development, the new residential area, all the walking tracks in this area, which is currently devoid of public toilet facilities that are available to the community during the weekdays and weekends. So there are alternative options here. We could, as with anything, we could sit and wait. We could approve, which is my recommendation. We could delay, or we could do nothing. But this officer's recommendation is that we do approve to fund the additional install of the toilet facility in the location identified, and that is funded through the financial contribution fund. I'm happy to take any questions on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, Jason. A really good report. One of the options that's outlined in here is to delay installation and investigate the construction of a full changing room facility. So I guess I'm wanting to gain an understanding of if there's likely to be a need for a full changing room facility in that location, and so are we being a little bit short-sighted by proceeding with just a toilet facility?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for that question there was. There is in the structure plan an identified additional 5 fields in this location in time, possibly 6, as well as the opportunity for a club to relocate there. We're currently in conversations with a club who are looking to relocate to this location, but there's no finite time frame for that. So we're in a current holding pattern around clubs providing funding, getting agreement from council, because any relocation of club would still need to come through this forum to gain a lease. I don't see that happening in the short term, and this problem is happening now. there is intent in time to build a facility there. It would have to be funded through future LTP cycles and through agreement with said club and development of those fields. Like I say, there's no current funding, I believe, in the LTP to build those additional fields. So this is fundamentally a stopgap measure, but it will be there for, I can see it being there for a reasonable long enough time to warrant the build. And with the current LTP not having funding for the future development of those fields, I do believe that this is the right option. And given we've already relocated the facility once, if we really wanted to, in 5-10 years, we could, if the building's structurally suitable, relocate it again and repurpose it. So I have considered those options, and I do believe that the best option for our city is to get this toilet facility in there as soon as possible to address the current issue.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Councillor McGrath.
Yeah, if this goes through today, will it be done by our in-house people, or is it going out to contractors? And if so, is there a start date and completion date on the cards for this?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, it's in-house. We're building it. We've just got to get some geotech reports done in the building consent, and we'll be on the way with it. While it's at the depot, we will be refurbishing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, did you have a question?
No.
Councillor Bowe?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Jason, with the extended use of this area and the obvious need for more toilet facilities, I wondered about drinking fountains. Will there be the need for extra drinking fountains with the extended use of this area?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. That's a very warranted question, and yes, I'd imagine that we will be needing to install drinking fountains in this general location. I'm happy to talk offline regarding the options around that, but I will look to investigate best locations for those. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Tapani.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Mine's really a supplementary to the Mayor's question and Councillor Bowe's, really. My question is, normally there would be considerations around location which cross-reference across things such as existing infrastructure underneath the fields, as well as foot traffic. I'm looking at the map and I see that it's at the northern end of the series of sporting facilities. So have you reached sufficient confidence with regards to where the demands are needed for those toilets? Because it refers to those who are up in that area already, but I'm also conscious that Park Island is a large area, and I'm wondering how we came to that location specifically, given that's quite a large geographical area.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for that question, Councillor Tipney. The location was specified in the original master plan for Park Island. So it was always envisaged that there would be a toilet and changing facility in that location. So I believe that thought process and acceptance has happened as part of the 2017 report that was endorsed by council, as well as that. What the picture probably doesn't show is there is an existing walkway through to the north parklands and the existing park facilities. We've installed the sewer and water and stormwater services to this location as part of installing, building the Hawke's Bay Rugby Union building, or as part of them putting in that development. So all the services are already on site, and there's multiple walkways to this location for other users outside of the rugby field users, and it was identified in the structure plan. So I think there's been sufficient thought around this location to warrant it being in this location, in my opinion, of course.
Thank you, Jason. I was just looking for that clarity. It didn't jump out at me from the report, so it was good to see this is part of a long-going process. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Do I have a mover for this paper, please? Councillor Taylor, seconded. Councillor McGrath. Would you like to?
Yeah, I'd just like to support it, and I'm sure Mr McRae would be very pleased to have a toilet adjoining alongside his field. And further to what Jason said, I've just noticed more recently there is a lot of pedestrian traffic down there, but also it's very close proximity to the cycleways. And having biked down there last night, there is no toilet facilities available for people who are cycling. So I think it's a welcome addition to the program. Thank you.
Councillor McGrath.
Just through the chair, I was actually down at the park a couple of months ago when there was a rugby match and against someone from Manawatu, and they brought up about 200 spectators, and they brought elderly grandparents and the works, and there was actually nowhere for them to go to the toilet. They had to hop in a car and actually drive back down to the other end of Park Island. So this is the exact right place to put a toilet block, and I certainly appreciate Councillor Bogue's suggesting that it needs a water fountain in the area as well, and maybe even a sports bottle filling station as well. And I think the facility will be as good as any around the city once we get this sorted.
Thank you, and I see Jason has written those items down, so hopefully that happens. Okay, I'll put the motion as per the officer's recommendation. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks, Jason. You can, you're done. Right, we're on to item 4. Reports on Napier water supply status end of third quarter. I'll leave it to you two to give us the rundown. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to just take the report as read. It's an operational report for water quality for our drinking water compliance. So I'm happy to take any questions that the council have.
Do we have any questions? Right. Do we have a mover for the paper, please? Councillor Simpson, seconded by Councillor Mawson. You'd like to speak, Nigel?
Through you, Mr Chair, yes. No, I love reports that say we're doing everything well.
Lots of green ticks.
Lots of green ticks.
Very good. Councillor McGrath.
Yeah, just through the chair, I'd just like to make a comment. It's actually full of green ticks. And according to the government, we're failing miserably, but I don't see it here.
That was a statement, eh?
How would you like me to?
No, that's all right.
Do you see it the same way?
I had lots of ticks on my school report that were green. I'll say no more. Okay, so no other questions. We've been moved. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Good work, team.
That was easy, wasn't it? Right, item 5, report on Three Waters reform program.
Thank you, Chair. As this is a regular operational report, I'd like to take this report as read and invite any questions.
Any questions? Mayor Wise.
Thank you. Through the chair. Actually, first of all, I'd just like to take an opportunity to say thank you, Rebecca, for all the work that you've done on the 3 reforms program, and you are heading off to a new role soon. So thank you for everything you've done, and all the best for your next adventure up in the big smoke of Auckland. So a couple of questions. Firstly, just with regards to the regional collaboration projects funding, which obviously is not being spent now on regional projects, so it's been redirected. Is there any risk that we won't be able to spend that in time to meet the 30 June deadline for that being taken off us?
Through the Chair. No, what we've done is placed it against the Low Manganese Water Project and removed some of the co-funding, so we will be spending that money before we spend any of that co-funding money.
Excellent, thank you. And I guess just an overarching question, which I think I ask every time you do come and talk to us. Are we currently at risk of losing any of the 12.51 million that we've been designated
At the moment, it's looking favourable that we won't, but until the final bills are in, we won't know.
Excellent. Thank you, Rebecca.
Any other questions? I have a mover for the officer's recommendation. Councillor Simpson, seconded by Mayor Wise. Would you like to speak?
Through you, Mr Chair, just further to the Mayor's references, I have enjoyed the simplicity of the reporting, particularly the attachment. It's been simple and easy for us to understand, and then for any members of our community to also see that the spending has been done prudently and wisely and transparently. So thank you for your contributions.
Thank you. No other comments? All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 6, adoption of the Code of Practice for Land Development and Subdivision Infrastructure. And Retha's online, I believe. No,
You're in
there.
person.
I was just put crook, but that was Debs that put me crook. I'm never wrong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The adoption of the Code of Practice for Land Development and Subdivision Infrastructure. So we have undertaken a review of the Code of Practice for Land Development and Subdivision to set the standards for infrastructure, for public infrastructure and Napier City Council. We've updated significantly from the previous code because the old code was really difficult to follow. The old code also form part of our district plan, and while the code is a means of compliance, so we have separated it now from the district plan, and it also gives us the opportunity to review it yearly and keep updating it on a yearly basis. So the main changes that we've done is we've updated it with the NZS 4404 for easy reference. We've worked in seismic resilience into the code. We've worked in sustainability. We've updated the drawings in the code. So the big changes were we aligned the code with the NZS 4404, Land Development and Subdivision Infrastructure Standard, the Hastings District Council documentation, national and international standards, environmental regulation changes, sustainability and climate changes, and we also followed the best practice for the industries. So with the new code, we have do a consultation process as part of the district plan. We have received feedback from the industry as well as from in-house from the infrastructure department. We have amended the code accordingly, and currently the code is now with a proofreader just to finalize the proofreading for us, and we would sort of our option is if we can adopt the new code once the proofreading has been done. Is there any questions?
Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Mr Chair. Just, it's good to see that we're joining major pieces of policy together, i.e. the district plan standard. My question relates mainly to the street lighting. From my place, I witnessed the advances that our council has made in reducing light pollution. I just want to be certain or understand the connection between, and I understand this standard is, or code of practice is more about public infrastructure. Does this guide the instalment or the installation of what would end up being private infrastructure? In other words, as we have reduced all our light pollution, as we move into the hills, which is our future, our city's future direction is to develop up in the hills, the more we go up in the hills, the more likely it is there's going to be private right-of-ways and private lanes that need to be lit. Does this guide those developers in the sort of standards they need to meet so that they do not, in future, produce light pollution?
I have bring Graham Eaglesworth today because he actually wrote the bit about the street lighting, so he knows exactly.
Yes, the street lighting and the guidelines for the developers only really refer to guidance on roads that will be adopted or infrastructure will be adopted by council. So infrastructure on private land is probably outside our control a little bit, unless it's actually in the resource consent conditions. So that's probably the area that probably maybe would need to be sharpened up in that circumstance. Yeah.
Mr Manaki has got a little bit of a support for you there.
Through the chair, it's quite right. The district plan deals with all the private side of it, and there are standards relating to how much lux you can spill on it over the boundary, which would apply to, and it does now, as we enforce other light spill kind of issues. So there are regulations that you have to meet in the district plan for those kind of effects.
Does that answer your question?
It's important that we join things up, so thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Kia ora, and through the chair. I note the climate change paragraph merely, refers to the standard, and I wondered, I hear that you're going to look to update this annually, and I wondered if we were going to look to put some Napier-specific measures in place as we learn more about what our adaptation measures will be as we go forward.
Yes, we'll be definitely doing that, and the idea of updating it yearly is to make sure we're on top of where the changes will be with climate change moving forward. Also, there's a lot of our products that we're using that are changing quite rapidly, and that's why we need to change the code often as well. We're trying to move away from products that are carbon intensive, like have a lot of carbon involved in their production and installation. So we're keenly looking out for opportunities as we go along with that. So we'll be removing, potentially in the future, removing items that are not climate friendly. And also we will have to additionally look at Napier specific things in relation to seismic and ground, etc., and all those sorts of things. We are starting to do that. We're certainly doing that with our lighting pole code of practice, where we've had issues with the galvanised street light poles and the chloride levels in the groundwaters. So we will be producing maps, for example, that only these new poles, the composite poles, can go in. So we are certainly bearing that in mind, and it will, with a yearly update, I'm sure we can keep on top of where we need to be.
Just supplementary, I'm thinking, one of the things I was thinking about was building height in terms of like inundation and flooding and stuff. Where does that fit within the code?
We have got some provisions in the code for inundation, but it is something that we probably need to do a bit more study and understanding on. I'm not sure how much we understand that issue at the moment. Other cities have done quite a bit of work on that, but I'm not sure exactly where Napier's at on that issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tapani.
Thank you, and through you, Mr Chair. So, greetings, Kōrua. My question's a little bit on the fringe of the paper, but in a similar vein to where we get alignment going into the future. Your report speaks of a resilient, sustainable infrastructure and blending in of some of more recent best practices. What I'm looking for is there sufficient flexibility within the developing policy and codes for us to be, I'm conscious that as we start shifting and intensifying a number of spaces within Napier, that will have an impact where private accesses public infrastructure, and my main thought is around sustainability and future development, particularly with those houses that might look to build a dwelling which does not connect to our infrastructure, which is independent, catches and reticulates its own water, for example, some of those smaller homes, for example. Is there sufficient scope and movement within, one, best practices going forward, and two, the development of this code to provide provision for those types of dwellings going into the future?
I would say that a lot of those, that issue would have to be dealt with at the consenting stage, as far as the district plan, probably more so than the engineering code. The engineering code tends to come in after the consent is virtually granted, but certainly we would be open to looking at that, I would imagine, but it'd have to be in relation to what the district plan says as well. Yeah.
So would it be fair to say that this is such a moving target that you have a yearly review you would pick up some changes that were perhaps mentioned today?
Definitely, yes.
Yeah.
So basically it's a daily thing that if we realise there's new technology or new designs coming out, then we will park that. Graham immediately starts working on the update so that once a year we can bring it to council to update.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you.
Any other questions? Do I have a mover and a seconder for this? Councillor Simpson, seconded by, I nearly seconded you, you moved your hand. Councillor Brown. Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Mr Chair, I'll just congratulate staff on concisely documenting such a huge amount of work and intelligence. It's I wouldn't say it was an enjoyable document to read through, but it certainly sets out the thinking that you've put in place around future-proofing the sustainability of our assets and the way things need to be installed in the future. And I just congratulate you on, the effort of pulling it together now and your commitment to maintain it going forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I think it's great and a very timely update, and I think one of the great things I like about it is that we're ironing out some inconsistencies with Hastings District Council, and I really appreciate that you've engaged with the local industry on it as well.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. All right, item 7, capital program delivery. Mr Kingsford.
Kia ora tātou. Thank you, Mr Chair. Once again, reporting on capital program delivery. I will look to take the report as read, but we'll just touch on a few key points. Already mentioned this morning from Deb is some of the tenders awarded, particularly around Pandora Industrial Pipeline. A couple of very important tenders out in the public arena at this point in time, including War Memorial Roll of Honour plaque restoration and a civic building demolition request for proposal. We've had a couple of contracts awarded, and as you can see, there's a multitude of contracts out in the public arena at this point in time, so you'll see those carry through into the awarded section. And likewise, projects nearing or at completion. Perhaps a bit of focus on processes underway. There's quite a bit of commentary in the report in that regard, and just to remind you that those are focused on providing all of our people across the whole of the organisation with the right tools and the right processes and the right support to lean into projects and delivery at whatever stage those people might be involved with them at. We are kicking off Project Management 101 training this month for our staff, and we've had a massive uptake in the offering of that training. So we're having to double the number of sessions that we're offering in that space. So that's awesome, really encouraging. And we're also kicking off our review of our project management framework this month, which will include a survey of those involved in project work and a focus group to work through what's raised through that survey. And just touching on the section delivery capacity constraints, there has been a bit of conversation about some of our challenges in moving projects along and our bottlenecks. So a big focus for program delivery has been where those bottlenecks might be and how we unpick those. And it'd be fair to say, as we've probably seen in the past in other processes, as you unpick one bottleneck, it highlights another. So we'll continue to look for improvement opportunities in that regard. But our panels, our Three Waters Technical Panel and our PM Project Management Panel are intended to unconstrain those parts of our program and primarily assisting our asset managers and activity managers with the development of project scopes so that we can move along those projects. The best problem that we could end up with out of these improvements is having a whole lot of scope in documents or a whole lot of designs in the drawer waiting for our next tranche of funding. So that's our goal, is to, I guess, create another problem to solve. But our panels will also assist in those parts of our program pathway. So that's probably enough from me. There is the table of projects at the back there that you will no doubt have seen. So I'll just invite any questions at this point.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. John, the Ellison Street Marine Parade walking and cycling improvements, I see we have an orange for financials and a red as well. And in the narrative, the scope may need to be reduced if there is insufficient budget. My understanding, this project was very much safety initiated, and so I'm concerned that we are looking to maybe change the scope. Can you just elaborate on what that would involve?
Oh, that's a really good question, Councillor Taylor. So the challenge that we have with regard to timeframes or the schedule and funding relate to COVID-related delays and the additional cost to the project that those generate, with the project basically being underway for a longer period of time. There are, I won't call them sunk costs, but preliminary and general costs associated with traffic management and reporting and health and safety that with extra time added to the project adds extra cost. And to be fair to the contractors, we are liable for those costs, so we agree to pay those. But that pushes the boundary on what is already a very tight budget. Part of the project scope was to undertake some work down Marine Parade, and so that may need to be pulled back to ensure that we have adequate funding. So this is raising the risk of that. And it's also raising the risk that our funding had a deadline with the Shovelry program of work, so we're pushed hard to meet those deadlines, and it may require those sorts of measures to make sure we come in the right timeframes and at the right cost. Thank you.
It was.
Thank you. Through the chair, Councillor Taylor had asked my question, but just to tease that out a little bit further, John. So with regards to the timeframes, is there still a risk? So are we in conversation with the funders? And if we don't meet that 30 June deadline, there's still a risk that we will lose some of that funding despite what's caused the delays?
We are in conversation with our funders, and at this point I can't succinctly answer the balance of your question. Yeah, so it's the reality of construction in our market today, and the reality is our market is so busy and our contractors are always looking for more work or looking to tender for more work, and that places extra pressure on materials and resource availability in a COVID impacted market. So it's pretty challenging. They're pretty understanding of those dynamics and the impacts that they have on completing work, but it's an ongoing conversation.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess just be pretty unreasonable, I think, if they were to pull any of that funding off us due to the reasons for the delays. So let's hope the conversation goes in the right direction.
Yeah, and I don't see it as a huge risk in that regard, but it is a risk, and that's why we're looking at all measures to make sure we come in timely and costly result.
Thank you.
So, I think Deb Stewart might be able to answer the question that Councillor Crown had in relation to update on the splash pad.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just in relation to the Maraenui splash pad, it's an integrated project where its funding's coming from several sources. It's currently being managed by one of our transportation team. We are pulling the bits and pieces together, so there's a little bit of roading in there, a little bit of community services work in there, and obviously the splash pad installation. So, and we'll also be working with the depot around the landscaping components of that. So I am told, despite a little bit of chaos midstream in that project, that it's on track. So hopefully that helps.
Councillor Bogue.
I was wondering, there was an issue I wanted to raise when this was discussed. I was at a community meeting last night, and they appreciate that, you know, there have been understandable delays with the splash pad in Maraenui, but there's chaos with the traffic management apparently. A lot of people don't realise that it's just one way while this build is being done, and there was a request for perhaps a little bit of temporary signage, like in this way, out that way, just to avoid some of the ongoing chaos that's occurring at the moment. Thanks.
Through you, Mr Chair, thanks. Councillor Bogue, I'll follow that up with the team to make sure we're not creating chaos out there. That's not what we're trying to do, I can assure you.
Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Mr Chair. I just want to look at the Priority Road corridor improvements. Just to note that there was another accident out there a week or so ago. Previously, it's been reported that it was pending NZTA funding. Now it's pending sorry, I can't quite read the... Sorry, I might have misread that. I thought it was waiting on somebody else, a new development up there. Oh, sorry, Puketitri Road is the one I'm confusing myself with. Concept design completed. Information on Emerald Hill development is required to progress the design further. So do we have timeframes around those?
Through you, Mr Chair, I don't have any timeframes on me right now to give you. Priority Road is seeking to integrate that with the Puketitri Road realignment on the basis to get a better safety outcome for that intersection with Puketitri Road and the Emerald Hills future development. So we are somewhat in the hands of the developer and how quickly they progress. I know that our transport teams and our project teams are in communication with the developer in that regard and are working through options for the intersection of that new development with Puketitri Road, and the transport team will use that to inform the process of how Priority Road will interact with Puketitri Road as well.
Did that answer your question?
Not really, but we don't know what we don't know, and staff don't know what staff don't know, so it's catch-22, isn't it?
Thank you. Any other questions? Right, do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Simpson, seconded Councillor Crystal. Any comments?
Just thank staff for the maintenance of this report. I know there's a large amount of manual involvement in producing this report, but hopefully in future improvements to our electronic project management system will make that easier.
Okay, all those in favour of the recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried.
Thank you.
I was hoping that we may get through this agenda prior to doing 2 hours for a break, so we'll just see how we go with this paper. So, item 8, better off funding.
Kia ora, Council, and through the Chair. So the purpose of this paper is to provide Council with further information around the reform money that's now available. So when the government signalled that they were going to undertake this proposed reform, it also put forward a better off package, and now the information has been fed through to councils around what that better off package looks like. The first tranche of funding is $500 million, And this funding is available through until September 2022, with the second tranche available in June 24. For Napier City Council, what this means is that we can apply for $6.4 million, and with the total available to us is $25.8 million, and the remainder of the funding is available in that second tranche. We can apply for all or part of that first component, and as you'll see in the agenda, we've attached what the agreement looks like, and as well as the Better Off package, which is from page 91 of the report, which outlines what we need to think about, what the options are for that funding. There is some details around what the intended funding is for, and it's to support communities to transition to a sustainable and low emissions economy, including building resilience to climate change and natural hazards, delivery of infrastructure and or services that enable housing development and growth, with a focus on brownfield and infield development opportunities where those are available, and the delivery of infrastructure and or services that support local placemaking and improvements in community wellbeing. So that's the framework in which the intended funding is for. We do note that the resolutions on the table today provide the options for council. We haven't provided an officer's recommendation here, so option A is to approve that council officers prepare an application for tranche 1 funding. Noting that council are currently part of the Communities for Local Democracy and may want to consider whether or not it continues with and seeks legal advice in relation to its proposal there, and otherwise it will, the option is not to continue or approve us to prepare the application. As we've noted in the report, we will bring back the proposed projects for council's consideration before we actually continue with the application. And I'll leave it with the Chief Executive if I've missed anything. Thank you.
Kia ora, so very comprehensive. Thank you, Adele. Essentially just bringing everyone's attention, it is a complicated paper, but there's a funding agreement and a funding proposal that we would need to complete. Officers are extremely keen to get started on the funding proposal, if that is the view of council. We have not done any work to date on what our proposal would be, and as you're all aware, it would take a few workshops to get to that point where we were in agreement what we would be seeking funding for, noting that the terms are very broad. So this is our first step. We need to put it back to you, Mr. Chair, for debate on the paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Wise.
Thank you. Question through the chair. I note in the paper that it notes that if we don't apply in tranche 1, the allocation will be retained and can be applied for in tranche 2. Will that be retained specifically for us, or does it become an open slather type process?
Through the chair, the allocation is for Napier, but it is subject to elections. And so this funding is available prior to elections. So I just want to make the comment there.
Make an additional comment, just drawing everyone's attention that there is tranche 1 funding and tranche 2 funding proposed. So the Director of Corporate Services question and the Mayor's question is relating to that tranche 1 funding, which is the 6.46 million. That money is committed by government and that money is for Napier. There is a question when it comes to tranche 2 funding. My understanding is that tranche 2 funding, if you are still following me, is subject to the water service entities making that available. I'm happy to take any questions on that. I think I even confused myself.
Thank you. And I think, yes, the tranche 2 funding, my understanding is 1.5 million of it will be debt funded by the new entities and 500 will be Crown funding, but of course it will be subject to the current government being re-elected, so it is quite at risk.
And just a small correction there, Mayor Wise, 1.5 billion.
Oh, billion.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So thank you for that, and I would also just like to foreshadow that I'm intending to move parts B, D and E of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Could the Mayor just repeat that? Intending?
B, D and E.
B, D and E.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Chair. And this is, at what stage is a signature of this council required?
In order to access Tranche 1 funding in 2022, agreements need to be signed by the 30th of September. So we would need to work with our DIA representative, find out what the actual final cut-off date is. But we don't have up to the 30th of September to apply. We need a signed agreement at that stage. So we'll work with our if that is the view of council, we'll work with our representative. Funding is actually available from the 30th of June. So some councils are getting their applications in earlier. Yeah.
Councillor Brown.
And just checking my assumption, any projects that we put forward, that have to be in addition to what we've already budgeted for in the annual plan, or could we put through something we've already, or long-term plan, sorry?
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Chair. They can add value to current projects, which is a very important part of the resolution. So noting that the Better Off Support Package application or successful application would not take over our existing work program. So as I said, we haven't done any level of work as to what our funding application would be, but we would be looking at our current projects first. Thank you.
So just to clarify, the motion foreshadowed by the Mayor does not prevent us from applying, does it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the motion put forward from the Mayor does not preclude officers getting started with all the work that you need to do to make that decision. Yep. We would be seeking reassurances from government that you could maintain your democratic right to have a say on the select committee process. And we would seek to do that in terms of clauses in the agreement. The decision for council will need to be made at some time in the near future as to whether or not they will be signing any documents.
Thank you. Councillor Crown.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Just wanting to tease that out a little bit further around the timeline, given current workloads, etc. I guess what's your educated opinion on when this decision would need to be made by council if we were to go with recommendation B today?
So in the spirit of just really giving my educated guess and not having done any work on this, I'd be thinking that we would want to be in a very clear position by the end of August as elected members as to what it is. If you were of the mind to use that money now, you would be wanting to use that money on. That would allow officers enough time to work with the DIA, make sure that we would be able to complete the application forms. I know that there is a sort of drop dead date that I said before of the 30th of September for things to be signed, but I know that there's also a willingness with the DIA through Crown Infrastructure Partners to be really agile, so there could be a bit of room post that.
Sorry, just one more. The arrangements with, or the contract basically that we would enter into through DIA, are they bespoke by council? Is there room for that type of negotiation, or is it simply we're all in getting the same version?
Thank you for the question. Through the chair, the contracts are the same across council. What we're proposing in Resolution B is that we would go back to the DIA and ask for some clauses that are specific to Napier City Council. It's an unusual request for us to make, but many of you will be aware that it's been stated verbally a number of times that, you know, the commitment to free speech, commitment to be able to continue to participate. So we believe that that's a logical step to ask government to clarify.
Did you get your question?
Yeah, just to sort of continue this timeline, how does the sort of, whether it's an unwritten or written rule of making major decisions within 3 months of the election, to me that would mean we're talking having to make a decision in July?
Thank you for the question. I suspect it would be dependent on whether or not council was wanting to put forward a whole new project, one that might not be currently considered, or whether we're adding value to projects that are already being debated and on the books. I suspect the next step for me, just listening to the debate, if council is amenable to this, is that between now and the council meeting, we would come back to you with a timeline as well for significant decisions.
Councillor Crystal.
This might be a bit of a silly question, but if the tranche 1 goes ahead and we get that, and then there's an election and a change of government who then pull the whole thing, do we have to give the money back?
Through the chair, as we understand, the answer is no, because that money would have been committed to.
Good question. Okay, any other questions? So would you like to put that motion?
Oh, sorry. Just following on from Councillor Crystal with silly questions. If DIA do not accept putting in these clauses which allow us to have continue our democratic right, what would be the course of action at that point in time?
Through the chair, we would need to seek advice for you to answer that fully. But obviously, if we are not successful with B to the level of satisfaction, I believe that would be a debate in its own right.
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah,
so yes, I will put the motion of, and I'll just summarise rather than reading out the full recommendations. Essentially, Part B is that we will, where have I got it here? Approve the preparation of applications subject to the clauses that we are seeking around democratic right, and that the funding agreement and funding proposal will be brought back to council for approval, and that any application is subject to the Chief Executive confirming it will not affect our ability to deliver existing work programs. And I guess just wanted to comment on a couple of things that have been raised in the course of questions, and I think one of them is that there are a number of other councils around the country, I think probably at least 32, if not more, who are intending to also start negotiations with DIA around making some changes to the clauses. So this is certainly not something that we're a lone voice on. And with regards to significant decision-making occurring within that 3-month election period, quite frankly, as the timeline is being forced upon us by central government, I do not see how we could be prevented from making decisions when it's outside of our control. So I guess the question that some people might be asking is free money from central government, and why would we say no? But is it really free? So it's been outlined in the paper today, the agreement that we have received from DIA most certainly has strings attached. As has been noted several times, if we accept this funding, we will no longer be able to exercise our democratic right to publicly oppose the proposed Three Waters reform. And after nearly 2 years of this appalling central government-led process, we are finally in a position to actually have a proper conversation with our community. We finally know exactly what the proposed model looks like, just last Friday. So at this pivotal time, as we prepare to engage in the select committee process, the final chance for councils and communities to have our say before this reform becomes legislated, why would we give away the right to share our concerns with our community? Secondly, the agreement requires compliance with any request for the secondment of an unspecified number of staff. Not only could this put delivery of our own Three Waters program at risk, It could potentially lead to our staff being poached by the newly established transitional unit, which is charged with setting up the 4 proposed multi-regional entities. And thirdly, the agreement restricts how we manage our Three Waters infrastructure by preventing us entering any new contract for the delivery of water services or borrowing any money that extends beyond the 30th of June 2024. This restricts us to a 2-year timeframe for planning and investing in our water infrastructure. Another roadblock to our community's aspirations to working towards a chlorine-free network. Personally, I absolutely cannot sign an agreement that gags us from speaking out against the reforms and puts our own Three Waters program delivery at risk. We have worked too hard and invested too much over the past 2 years to lose momentum now. So it is for these reasons that I have moved the motion today that we approve the preparation of an application so staff can get going for the Tranche 1 Better Off support package, subject to the Crown agreement, that Napier City Council can continue to exercise its democratic right to oppose, voice concerns and question the legitimacy of the Three Waters reform proposal, and that the funding agreement and funding proposal will be brought back to Council for approval. And lastly, that any application to the Better Off support package is subject to our Chief Executive confirming this will not affect Council's ability to deliver our existing capital and operational Three Waters work programme.
So that motion has been seconded by Councillor Simpson. Do you want to speak again? We've now seconded the motion. So have we got any comments? Did you want to? Councillor Simpson, you want now or reserve your right?
No, I'll speak now because I endorse all of the sentiment expressed by the Mayor. I think we have to put it into perspective. This offer of money is a very small amount compared with our capital spend. So I think we should not resist the opportunity to apply for it. With the caveats that are proposed, because that's our starting point. We don't have to put a lot of energy in, we just simply go to DIA and say, if this is our caveat, can we apply? And they'll come back pretty quickly. We don't have to expend a huge amount of energy to get that answer. But if we aren't entitled to that tranche or that first amount because of our desire to maintain our freedom of speech, it's not a lot of money we will miss out on, but it will certainly help us if we can get it to enhance some existing work. So I think we can't miss that opportunity. But I concur entirely with the sentiments of the Mayor and the way she has expressed her concerns, around the previous processes and how this Three Waters scenario is going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Bogue.
I'm going to speak against the resolution. I support the Three Waters proposal from the government, and I think it's a bit cheeky for us to ask for money from the government and then be expected to be constantly criticising them for the reason why they've given it to us. So for members of the public who are not familiar with the big picture, I'd like to provide some background information which has informed my decision to support the Better Off funding offer without asking to criticise it. So with the new water regulations coming into force, all councils in New Zealand agree that the status quo is not going to meet these and that we all have to invest in our Three Waters more than we'd anticipated. And this is translated into $404 million, which we have put into our LTP. In 2020, our 5 Hawke's Bay councils put forward a regional model to enable us all to meet those standards using a regional asset-owning CCO with co-design and co-governance with Māori built in. When the government's Three Waters reform package came out, our regional model was rejected and a model with 4 large entities owning and governing our water assets was proposed. So after an outcry from many councils, the model was recently changed from recommendations from the working group that had been set up to look at changing or criticisms. In the new reform model, each council will take a non-financial shareholding in the 4 entities which will be governed by a regional representation group This group will be split 50-50 between councils and iwi groups to protect against privatisation. It would also require a 75% majority in Parliament for sale of these assets. Last year, our council joined a group of councils called Communities for Local Democracy, who are opposed to the government's Three Waters reforms. They want the reform legislation scrapped, councils allowed to develop their own way of meeting the new regulations, and to get funds from the government to top up any shortfalls. In spite of our being part of this group, the Napier City Council was still able to receive $12.5 million last year from the government to help with our water assets. However, this funding we're being offered now comes with fishhooks, as the Mayor said. If we accept the $25.82 million being offered in the next two tranches, we would be required in the contract to openly support the government's reform proposals, which is no surprise. It's a matter of not biting the hand that feeds you. So I support accepting it, and here are my reasons. First, we're being offered $25.82 million, which would otherwise come from our ratepayers. It doesn't even have to be spent on water reforms. Second, I support the reforms with the new protections built in, as across New Zealand there has been serious underfunding of water assets, which means many will not meet the new Taumata Arawai water safety regulations. Even under our regional model, with our water assets pooled, there would be winners and losers, some councils subsidising others. Thirdly, I also support the co-governance aspect of the government's reform, and it's an essential part of our own regional model, which has resulted in a loud outcry from some groups who oppose Māori wards who oppose the treaty, such as Hobson's Pledge, the Taxpayers Union, the ACT Party and New Zealanders for Democracy, to mention a few. It's become very political and in many ways anti-Māori. Co-governance is not separatism. It's a form of partnership already working successfully in many contexts. It's a key element of our own regional proposal. Communities for Local Democracy, including our council, has committed to working positively with Māori, though as yet this has not happened in Ahuriri Napier. From my understanding, we have never asked our tai whenua or our PSG Mana Ahuriri about how they feel about the government's Three Waters proposal, so we have a lot of catching up to do. We know that our Kahungunu iwi chiefs, present and past, support the government's reforms, so there's a real risk of further alienation if we find that our mana whenua entities feel the same way. It's likely most people don't care who governs our water services. They just don't want to be poisoned by it or have brown water coming from their taps or have wastewater flowing into the estuary. We all want to see our waterways and wetlands improved and even restored, and that happens to be a key interest of mana whenua who will co-govern. Basically, we want water services to work without being cripplingly expensive. So for me, the best option is for us to accept the better off funding, because I believe our community will indeed be better off for us doing so.
Thank you. Do we have any other people wish to speak? Councillor McGrath. I'll bear in mind at the end of this we will have a break. As I said before, I was hoping to get there by 11:30, but we haven't.
Just through the chair, I support the Mayor's recommendations that she's put forward here. I had a question during the week, and that was, if we signed the agreement coming into election, as current councillors, would we be able to speak against the government and against the Three Waters? Now, if we weren't able to, that would put us at a huge disadvantage when we were out campaigning to any other member of the public. And I'm hoping that can be followed up when we contact DIA and ask exactly where we sit with that, because I'd hate to sign something now and then find out that we couldn't actually campaign on it.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Today I'm going to speak and vote in favour of the Mayor's recommendations. However, I just look at what has happened in the past, and every opportunity that we have had to negotiate and have some, the government give a little, as the Mayor indicated, hasn't really come to any fruition. So I think, yes, give it a crack. but I'm not very confident that we'll get any compensation as far as being able to speak and have our democratic right.
Thank you. Okay, Rose, you want to close?
Thank you. I think what I really want to highlight here is that the proposed model is most definitely not a done deal. It's not yet legislated, so why would we roll over and give up future opportunities to continue to advocate on behalf of our community? So the next step is a select committee process, and we will be engaging and assisting our communities to be involved in that process as we move forward. With regards to some of the comments made by Councillor Bogue about the Communities for Local Democracy group, the group does not oppose reform. They oppose the current proposed reform model. The group does not want regional or local-based regulatory systems or organisations. They completely agree with the new national regulator, Taumata Arawai. The group has put forward alternative models, just as we have here with our Hawke's Bay model, and these have all been ignored. So we need to continue to use the levers that are available to us to engage with central government and get a better outcome for our community. Councillor Bogue also made reference to co-governance, and again, that is something that is in the Hawke's Bay model, and that is something that the Communities for Local Democracy group is advocating each region should be able to do for their region with their local iwi. And I would point out that the chair of Ngā Manukanuka o Te Iwi, our own Māori committee, is not supportive of the current reform model. And a comment that I can make that he has posted on Facebook is not only has the government failed to consult our whānau hapu marae, but our own iwi leaders have also failed. Now that we actually know what the proposed reform looks like, we can go out to our community, to our iwi, to our whānau hapu marae, and we can truly engage and ensure that they understand what this means for them and fight alongside them for the best outcome possible. Thank you.
Could we please just put the motion up on the board, please? Righto, so I'm going to put that motion to everybody. All of those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against?
Me.
Thank you, carried. We'll now have a 10-minute adjournment and come back. We'll make it a little bit more and we'll come back at 11:45. Thank you. We all in place? Debs, where are you? Is the, must be. Righto, item 9, road stopping and granting of easement over vested reserve, Awatoto. And we've got Brian.
Good morning. Look, this item simply seeks approval to agree to actions required to provide appropriate land legalisation actions to accommodate the new drinking water bore field at Awatoto, and also at the same time we're seeking approval to grant an easement over the adjoining reserve land for infrastructure. So these actions are required, both the road stopping and the easement, to legalise the situation to accommodate those low manganese water bores. So simply some technical issues really to legalise that. And obviously these low manganese water bores are part of the top priority for council with regards to clean water. So I'll just emphasise that the road we're stopping, it's a legal term, it's not a formed road. It's that's a legal term under the Public Works Act and the Local Government Act, so it's not a formed road. They're leaving a quite a wide strip for future proofing for possible cycleways or walkways in the future. So it is not a formed road, so we're not really impacting public use.
Thank you.
Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of that? No questions. I have a mover, please. Councillor Mawson, seconded by Councillor Crystal. Would you like to speak?
Oh, it's a bit of a no-brainer. We don't want to hold up any water projects, so get it done.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Crown?
Just a quick one. I think we've had at least 3 or 4 members of staff today mention that water is our top priority. So it's lovely to see that throughout all levels of our organisation as well as our community.
Thank you. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Item 10, lease of reserve at Anderson Park to Buzzy B Trust. Brian.
Yes, so this item seeks approval under the Reserves Act to enter into a new lease with a new charitable trust. It relates to the Girl Guides Hall at Anderson Park. It's been there for a number of years. Bottom line, the Girl Guides Association are wanting to get out of building ownership. So this is a new charitable trust who'll take over that hall. They'll repaint it as part of the requirement under the lease. It's in a pretty run-down condition. And they'll make it available for the Girl Guides plus other recreational activities because it sits on a recreation reserve.
Right. Yep. Any questions on that, please? Councillor Crystal.
Just who is the Buzzy B Trust?
It's a newly formed charitable trust. It has registration with the Charities Commission, and it would have, sorry, I haven't got the details of the people involved, but it would have its own board of trustees and what have you. So it's a not-for-profit charitable organisation that's been set up. I think they do undertake other activities, but it's been set up to take over this hall.
So obviously the credibility of people would be checked out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah.
Councillor Tapani.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. Nice simple question, Brian. Are there any implications around changes or amendments to the agreement, or will it just be rolled over with the Buzzy B Trust?
No, this is a completely new lease. So the lease with the Girl Guides, that'll be cancelled. This is a completely new lease.
So does that by extension open the opportunity to engage in conversations with the Buzzy B Trust that might result in changes of activity in that space?
Well, the lease will be quite specific that they can only, the activities in that building have to be related to recreation.
Thank you.
No other questions? Do I have a mover, please? Councillor Brown, seconded. Councillor Wright. Councillor Brown, would you like to speak?
Just that this seems to be a good solution for the Girl Guides, and that they get to make their organisation a bit more sustainable and still get a home within Anderson Park. So, brilliant.
No other comments? All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 11, initiation of progress to change reserve purpose.
Look, this is very similar to the prior item. This relates to land legalisation issues for the new drinking water bore field and associated equipment at on reserve land at Guppy Road. So once again, this is to legalise situation for the low manganese water bore field at that Guppy Road site. So it's simply changing a very small portion of that reserve from local purpose sport and recreation building reserve to local purpose water supply reserve. So it's simply a change in classification of the reserve.
Any questions? Councillor Taylor.
Just getting my head around that. The buildings at the bottom, that's the regional council?
On the right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's that large open paddock opposite.
Yeah, between Tarryha and the expressway, yes.
So A is the area.
Yeah, the area outlined in green is A, so it's a very small part of that.
Okay. No other questions? It's moved by the Mayor, seconded by Councillor Simpson.
I guess, as has been stated earlier in the road stopping of Awatoto, this is with regards to a water project, but just to tease that out a little bit further, these two items are actually with regards to resolving our dirty water issues. So obviously something that our community is very keen on, so the sooner we can get this sorted, the better.
No other comments? All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. I'll now adjourn the Sustainable Napier Committee meeting and hand over to Councillor Tapani.
Thank